The cause of death for Mr. Gene Hackman, aged 95 years, is hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's disease as a significant contributory factor.
Gene Hackman wasn't just a Hollywood icon. He was a force in the film industry, known for performances that left a lasting mark. But in a strange and unsettling twist, his final days are wrapped in mystery. Suspicion clouds the shocking deaths of the Oscar-winning actor and his wife, who were both found in their Santa Fe home. What really happened behind those walls? At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The autopsy showed no external injuries on either body. But as investigators dug deeper, unsettling details began to emerge. 2 green-colored cell phones, 2 bottles of medication, one of them an over-the-counter painkiller, were discovered inside the house. These odd clues, paired with unanswered questions and contradicting evidence, transformed what should have been a straightforward case into something much more baffling. Now, new evidence from Gene Hackman's estate has surfaced, and it will leave you speechless. A shocking discovery made headlines just days ago, sending the internet into a frenzy. News broke that the legendary actor had been found dead inside his Santa Fe home. But the tragedy didn't stop there. His wife, Betsy Arakawa, and their beloved dog were also discovered lifeless. The unsettling discovery happened on an otherwise quiet afternoon when a maintenance worker arrived for a routine check at the couple's estate. After knocking with no response, concern set in. The couple had always been private, but something about this felt different. Worried, the worker contacted neighborhood security, who quickly arrived to investigate. Peering through a window, they were met with a chilling sight. Both Hackman and his wife lay motionless inside. Without hesitation, they called 911. Minutes later, deputies from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office arrived and entered the house. A heavy silence filled the space. There were no signs of a break-in, no broken windows, no forced doors, nothing out of place. Yet, something was undeniably wrong. Betsy's body was found near a bathroom counter, as if she had been there for a while. Nearby, in a closet, the couple's small dog was also found lifeless. On the surface, there were no obvious signs of struggle or injury. And then, there was Gene. At 95, the legendary actor, once larger than life on screen, was discovered nearby. He too showed signs that he had been there for some time. A pair of sunglasses rested beside him, as if they had fallen from his hands in his final moments. Despite the eerie circumstances, nothing in the house seemed disturbed. The furniture remained in place, valuables were untouched, and there was no evidence of a struggle. Just an unsettling stillness that made the whole situation even more bizarre. Adding to the mystery, while one dog had passed away, 2 others were still alive. One standing near Betsy, the other roaming the property freely. If something had gone terribly wrong in that house, why had the other dogs survived? To rule out environmental factors, officials from the Santa Fe Fire Department and the New Mexico Gas Company tested for gas leaks and carbon monoxide poisoning. Their results? Nothing. The air was clean, the pipes intact, and there was no sign of any toxic exposure. At first, deputies leaned toward natural causes. Hackman was 95, and while Betsy was much younger at 65, age-related health issues couldn't be ruled out. Maybe it was just an unfortunate tragedy, a sudden illness, or a heartbreaking accident. But the more investigators looked into it, the stranger it all became. Why hadn't anyone heard from them in weeks? Why were they found in different parts of the house? And why did only one of their pets die while the others survived? Initially, there was no reason to believe foul play was involved. But as more pieces of the puzzle emerged, explaining the circumstances around their deaths became increasingly difficult. The case that seemed simple at first had suddenly turned into a chilling mystery, one that has left the world searching for answers. We have his phone in our possession, investigators revealed. We'll be analyzing call logs, text messages, photos, everything. But before diving deeper into the shocking discoveries from the investigation, let's take a step back and look at the man behind the legendary roles. Who was Gene Hackman? How did a restless kid from the Midwest rise to become one of Hollywood's most respected actors? Eugene Allen Hackman was born on January 30th, 1930, in San Bernardino, California, but his childhood was anything but stable. His family was always on the move, chasing opportunities that never quite worked out. Eventually, they settled in Danville, Illinois, where young Gene grew up in a home filled with struggle. His father worked long hours at a local newspaper, operating the printing press, while his mother did her best to hold the family together. But life took a painful turn when Gene was just 13. His parents divorced and his father walked out, never looking back. Imagine being a young boy and watching your dad disappear, knowing he would never come home again. It's the kind of thing that can either break you or push you to prove your worth. For Gene, it was the latter. Even as a child, he dreamed of being an actor. At just 10 years old, he saw his first movie and was instantly captivated by the action stars of the time, especially James Cagney. But who would have believed that a kid from a broken home, constantly moving from place to place, could ever make it in Hollywood? By the time he was 16, Gene had had enough of school and small-town life. Without telling anyone, he lied about his age and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Can you imagine? A teenager barely old enough to drive, signing up for one of the toughest military branches? The Marines took him far from home, first to China, where he was stationed in Qingdao and later in Shanghai. But history was unfolding fast, and when China fell to communist forces in 1949, Gene was reassigned to other locations, spending time in both Hawaii and Japan. Serving as a field radio operator, he was thrown into the heart of military operations, gaining discipline, structure, and a strong sense of purpose. But even then, in the middle of military life, that childhood dream of acting never disappeared. After 4.5 years in 1951, Gene was honorably discharged. What followed was a string of odd jobs and a future that seemed uncertain. He made his way to New York City, doing whatever work he could find just to get by. But then, tragedy struck again. In 1962, his mother died in a house fire she accidentally started while smoking. Another devastating loss. But instead of letting it crush him, Gene used it as fuel to keep going. Determined to follow his passion, he studied journalism and television production at the University of Illinois under the GI Bill. But Hollywood was calling, and it was too strong to ignore. Soon, he left school behind and moved to California, determined to make acting his full-time career. In 1956, he joined the Pasadena Playhouse, a well-known training ground for up-and-coming actors. It was here that he met a young Dustin Hoffman, and the two quickly became friends, bonding over their shared status as outsiders. But not everyone saw their potential. In fact, both Gene and Hoffman were voted least likely to succeed by their classmates. Ouch. One instructor even gave Gene the lowest score in the history of the Playhouse. Imagine being told to your face that you'd never make it. Most people would have given up right then and there, but not Gene. That rejection only made him more determined. Moving to New York City, he lived in cramped apartments with Hoffman and another struggling actor, Robert Duvall. At the time, they were just three broke young men chasing an impossible dream. No fame, no fortune, just raw ambition. To survive, they took whatever work they could find, scraping by while waiting for that one big break that could change everything. Gene took on whatever jobs he could find to make ends meet, even working as a doorman at a Howard Johnson's restaurant. But little by little, things started to change. Small roles trickled in, and soon he was popping up in TV shows like Route 66, Naked City, and The Defenders. His first film credit came in Lilith, where he starred alongside Warren Beatty and Gene Seberg. Then, in 1967, he got his big break playing Buck Barrow, the brother of the infamous outlaw Clyde in Bonnie and Clyde. The film was a huge hit, and Gene's performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Suddenly, Hollywood was paying attention, but the road to success wasn't without its bumps. He was originally cast as Mr. Robinson in The Graduate, but after 3 weeks of rehearsal, director Mike Nichols let him go, saying he looked too young for the role. Ouch. Still, Gene didn't let the setback get to him. More roles followed, including parts in Hawaii and Downhill Racer. He even had the chance to play the dad in The Brady Bunch, but he turned it down, a decision that could have taken his career in a completely different direction. By the early 1970s, Gene wasn't just another working actor. He was a powerhouse. Hollywood had taken notice of his raw talent, and soon, the roles that would define his legacy started rolling in. One of the biggest came in The French Connection, 1971, where he played Jimmy Popeye Doyle, a relentless New York detective who would do whatever it took to catch the bad guys. It was gritty, intense, and completely unforgettable. His performance won him the Academy Award for Best Actor and cemented his status as a Hollywood heavyweight. Watching Gene in that film, you can see why he became such a legend. He didn't just play a character, he became them. His intensity, frustration, and sheer determination felt so real, it was impossible to look away. But Gene never wanted to be boxed in as just an action star. He had a rare ability to slip effortlessly between genres, moving from thrillers to comedies, westerns, and deeply emotional dramas. Throughout the 1970s, he worked at a breakneck pace, starring in films that would go on to become cinematic classics. One of his personal favorites was Scarecrow, 1973, where he teamed up with a young Al Pacino. The movie wasn't a huge box office success, but critics loved it, and it even won the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It was a quieter, more introspective role for Gene, showing he could bring depth and vulnerability to a character just as easily as he could deliver hard-hitting performances. Then came The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. In this one, Gene played Harry Call, a surveillance expert who gets caught in a tangled web of paranoia and secrecy. The film was subtle but incredibly powerful, revealing a different side of him. Quiet, reserved, but tormented by his own conscience. Watching him in that role, you can feel his unease, his loneliness. It was yet another masterclass in acting, and the movie earned an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. Just when it seemed like Gene had done it all, he switched things up in a way no one expected, by stepping into the world of comedy. In 1978, he took on the role of Lex Luthor in Superman, the movie. It was a complete departure from his usual work, but he absolutely nailed it. His version of Luthor was the perfect mix of charm, arrogance, and dark humor. Intelligent, yet completely ruthless. Audiences loved it, and he went on to reprise the role in 2 more Superman sequels, cementing his place as one of the most iconic movie villains of all time. By the time the 1980s and 1990s rolled around, Gene had already built a legendary career. He had nothing left to prove, but that didn't stop him from taking on bold, challenging roles. He played a tough-as-nails basketball coach in Hoosiers, a film that's still considered one of the greatest sports movies ever made. Then came Mississippi Burning, where he portrayed an FBI agent investigating the murder of civil rights activists in the Deep South, a role that earned him yet another Oscar nomination. And then, in 1992, he delivered one of his most unforgettable performances in Unforgiven, directed by Clint Eastwood. But this wasn't your typical Western. This was dark, gritty, and brutally realistic. Gene played Little Bill Daggett, a sadistic sheriff who believed he was bringing justice but was in reality just another kind of monster. His chilling performance in Unforgiven won him his 2nd Academy Award, this time for Best Supporting Actor. Even as he entered the later years of his career, Gene continued to surprise audiences with his versatility. But by the early 2000s, after nearly 5 decades in Hollywood, he decided it was time to step away from the screen. His final film was Welcome to Mooseport, 2004, a lighthearted comedy that, while not a major hit, served as a fitting farewell to a legendary career. Though Gene was the public figure, there was someone equally important in his life: his wife, Betsy Arakawa. While she may not have been as well known as her famous husband, Betsy played a significant role in his journey. Born in December 1959 in Hawaii, Betsy was a talented musician from an early age. She grew up in Honolulu, where she began studying piano as a child. By the time she was just 11, she was already performing in youth concerts at the Honolulu International Center Concert Hall. Imagine that, an elementary school student standing on a grand stage playing for an audience that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was clear she had a rare gift, one that would stay with her throughout her life. After high school, Betsy continued her education at the University of Southern California from 1981 to 1983. But her interests weren't limited to classical music. She had an adventurous spirit, and her early years were filled with unexpected experiences. She worked as a cheerleader for the Aztecs, a professional soccer team, and even took on a job as a production assistant for the television game show Card Sharks. However, fate had something even bigger in store for her. Betsy met Gene Hackman in the mid-1980s while working part-time at a gym in California. By then, Gene was already a Hollywood legend, an Oscar winner, the unforgettable Lex Luthor, and one of the most respected actors in the industry. But despite all his success, there was something about Betsy that captivated him. Maybe it was her calmness, her ability to balance his often intense and demanding world. Whatever it was, the two quickly became inseparable. They moved in together, and by the end of the decade, they decided to leave the chaos of Los Angeles behind, settling in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Santa Fe became their sanctuary, a place where they could enjoy life's simple pleasures, from art and music to the breathtaking landscapes of the Southwest. Their home, featured in Architectural Digest in 1990, was a masterpiece, blending Southwestern styles and perched atop a 12-acre hill with stunning 360-degree views of the surrounding mountains. While Jean continued acting in major films throughout the 90s and early 2000s, Betsy found her own creative outlet. She became the vice president of Pandora, a well-known home decor and furnishing store in Santa Fe. With a keen eye for design and beauty, she found a way to express her creativity beyond music. It was clear that they were true partners in life. They attended Santa Fe's cultural events together, supported each other's passions, and built a quiet, private existence that most Hollywood couples could only dream of. For more than 30 years, Jean and Betsy were inseparable. When Jean stepped away from acting in 2004, they continued their life in Santa Fe, embracing a peaceful retirement filled with art, music, and close friendships. And in the end, they even left this world together. But the circumstances surrounding their passing left behind silent clues. Earlier, we mentioned that the first thing investigators did was test for carbon monoxide poisoning, and the results were negative. However, they still couldn't rule it out completely. Investigators knew that carbon monoxide poisoning could be deceptive. It doesn't always show up in tests the way you'd expect. Could the initial results have been misleading? Could a silent, invisible killer have crept through Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's home without leaving an obvious trace? Carbon monoxide poisoning is always one of the first things authorities check in cases like this. It's an odorless, colorless gas that can silently replace oxygen in the bloodstream, suffocating its victims without warning. But Dr. Philip Keene, a retired chief medical examiner, pointed out something crucial. If the initial tests came back negative, it would be highly unlikely for carbon monoxide to be the cause of death. Even so, investigators weren't ready to rule it out completely. Toxicology tests take time, and false negatives do happen. If there had only been a small leak in the house, the carbon monoxide levels in their bodies might not have been high enough to detect immediately. As the search continued, detectives found something else that raised more questions: medication. A lot of it. There were pills for high blood pressure, chest pain, and thyroid issues, along with over-the-counter Tylenol and medical testing records. But who did these medications belong to? Authorities wouldn't say. What they did confirm, however, was that none of the pill bottles appeared to be out of place, except for the ones found near Gene's body in the bathroom. Had he collapsed suddenly while reaching for his medicine? Or had something else happened? Detectives weren't taking any chances. They retrieved the bottles and sent them for further analysis. Toxicology tests would take weeks, but the results could reveal whether a dangerous combination of drugs had played a role in their deaths. Then came another unsettling discovery: the state of their bodies. Both Hackman and Arakawa had been dead long enough for mummification to begin. Her hands and feet had already started the process, a sign that the dry, high-altitude climate of Santa Fe had accelerated decomposition. But without surveillance cameras or clear records of when they were last seen alive, investigators had no way of determining exactly when they had died. That's when they turned to an unexpected source of information: Gene's pacemaker. A pacemaker isn't just a life-saving device. It also stores data. Every time it activates, it leaves behind a digital record, like a heartbeat timeline that doctors can review. Detectives hoped that by analyzing Gene's pacemaker, they could pinpoint the exact moment he died. If they could do that, they'd have a much clearer picture of the timeline leading up to their deaths. What they found was surprising. The last recorded activity on Hackman's pacemaker was on February 17th, 9 days before their bodies were discovered. That meant he had been dead for over a week before anyone realized something was wrong. But that led to an even more chilling question. What about Betsy? Had she passed away at the same time? Or had she been alive for days after Gene was gone? The timeline had become more confusing than ever. Nothing made sense, and with each new detail that surfaced, it became clearer that this was not a simple case of natural causes. So what exactly did investigators find inside Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's home? And more importantly, what did these items reveal about their final days? When authorities entered the Santa Fe estate, they expected answers. Instead, they found more questions. Detectives quickly identified 6 key items that could unlock the mystery: 2 cell phones, medical records, a 2025 calendar planner, and 3 different medications. There were 2 green-colored cell phones, 2 bottles of prescription medication, 1 bottle of over-the-counter Tylenol, a stack of medical records, and a 2025 monthly planner. Each of these objects held the potential to reveal crucial details about what had happened inside that house before the world realized something was terribly wrong. The first major clues came in the form of 2 green-colored cell phones. Phones can provide a digital footprint of a person's last moments. Texts, calls, voicemails, search history, even GPS locations. Investigators seized them, hoping to piece together the couple's final days. Who had they spoken to last? Had they reached out for help? Had Betsy been calling someone while Gene was already gone? And then there was the biggest question. Was there anything on those phones that someone didn't want to be found? Next came the 2025 monthly planner. It might seem like just another household item, but in cases like these, a calendar can be incredibly revealing. People use them to jot down appointments, meetings, plans, sometimes even reminders about medications. Did Betsy or Gene have a doctor's visit scheduled? Were there notes about their health? Had they written anything that hinted at trouble? If they had been struggling, whether with health issues or something else, would their planner show it? Then came the medications. 3 different types were taken from the house. Thyroid medication, a common prescription. But could it indicate underlying health issues? Diltiazem, used to treat high blood pressure and chest pain. And Tylenol, an ordinary over-the-counter pain reliever. But in cases like this, it takes on a different significance. The most concerning discovery was a bottle of pills scattered on the bathroom counter near Betsy's body. Had she collapsed while taking them? Had she taken too many? Or had someone else left them there? When Sheriff Mendoza was questioned about whether the pills found at the scene could have played a role in the deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, he was careful not to dismiss the possibility. He made it clear that every angle needed to be investigated, and while there was no immediate conclusion, toxicology tests would be the deciding factor. These tests, however, were not instant. Analyzing substances in the body takes time, and investigators knew it could be weeks before they had definitive results. Until then, all they had were fragments of a mystery and endless speculation. But the unsettling details didn't stop with the medications. As detectives dug deeper, they found themselves faced with an even greater challenge: figuring out the timeline of events. The couple had always been known for their privacy, rarely making public appearances or sharing much about their personal lives. This made it incredibly difficult to determine when they had last been seen or spoken to. Did anyone have contact with them in their final days? Had they been struggling in silence for longer than anyone realized? With no clear records of their last interactions, the investigation became more complicated. The more detectives searched for answers, the more the pieces refused to fit together. And with every step forward, one thing became disturbingly apparent. This was no ordinary case of 2 people passing away peacefully in their home. Something was off, and investigators could feel it. Then came a revelation so unexpected, so disturbing, that it sent shockwaves far beyond the crime scene. Just when it seemed like authorities had gathered all the crucial evidence, when it appeared that the case had reached a standstill, a new discovery at Gene Hackman's estate changed everything. The information was so startling that it even reached prominent media figures, including Tucker Carlson, who reportedly discussed it with his colleagues before recording his show. According to sources, Carlson was stunned by what had been uncovered. "This is shocking," he allegedly told his team. "I can't believe no one checked on them earlier, especially considering what the police found." So, what exactly had investigators uncovered that was so alarming? It was a simple yet chilling detail. The front door of the house had been left unlocked while the back door was found slightly ajar. This single discovery shifted the entire direction of the investigation. Up until this point, authorities had been leaning toward the theory that the deaths may have been accidental or health-related. But now, with the doors left open, it raised disturbing new questions. Had someone been in the house with them? If so, who? And more importantly, was that person responsible for what had happened? With this new evidence, the possibility that a third party had been involved could no longer be ignored. Theories that once seemed unlikely were suddenly being reconsidered. The case had taken a dramatic turn, and investigators knew that whatever truth lay behind these deaths, it was going to be far more complicated than anyone had initially assumed. The mystery had only deepened. The answers were coming, and when they finally arrived, they would change everything. What do you think about the doors being left open? Does this detail suggest something far more sinister than just a tragic accident?